Guess what, everyone? It is time for us to learn some more FileMaker Pro. My name is Matt Petrowski, bringing you these videos, and in this lesson, we're just going to be talking about plain and simple layout design. Stick with me, we'll be on my desktop in just a few. All right, so here we go for today's lesson. Now this one, layout design, general word. I mean, that can encompass all kinds of things with regards to developing in FileMaker Pro or any software product for that matter. But we're going to do that. I'm basically just going to be working on the file today, and you'll be able to watch as I talk through my thought process of rearranging things on the layout and doing all those various things. If you found this video as a result of a YouTube search, you can click on the channel icon. It's probably either below or it's somewhere on the page, unless YouTube has redesigned the page. But look for the logo of the channel. That will take you to the channel, and then you will be able to see all of the different series of videos that I've been creating if you want to follow these in sequence. Likewise, if you'd like to follow along, there is a link in the description below where you can access the file that I'm going to be showing you, which is going to be this one right here, time track. I need to make sure that I'm in FileMaker, or make sure FileMaker is not locked there. I don't know why it's not showing that. What's going on, FileMaker here? Do you have a script? FileMaker has a script that is still stuck. That does happen. Notice how everything's gray on my screen. If you ever get in this situation and the menus look like they're locked out, it usually means that a script is paused. And I can see in my file over off on my monitor here that I do have a pause script. And now that I've clicked to unpause that, everything unlocks. It happens to all the best of us at various points in time. All right, so time track. This is the file that you have access to. We've been working on the design of this. Up to this point, I've just been showing things specific to things that I do in design. We talked about layout parts. We talked about multi-purposing this layout part. That's what I'm doing down here on this trailing grand summary. I'm using an off-screen tab. You can see that control widget right there, where I'm using the opportunity to completely hide and show complete different areas of the layout. This is still a mess. I've done nothing with regards to designing the layout for the intended purpose, and that's what we're going to be doing in this particular video. But just before we do that, I want to make sure that you know about this.
This video has been brought to you by FileMakerThemes.com. It's a one-stop shop for choosing a theme to apply to your new or existing FileMaker solution. When considering your next move toward advancing the look and feel of your FileMaker solution, don't forget to visit FileMakerThemes.com.
And we're back. All right, cool deal. So let's get this cleaned up. Now, when it comes to layout design, one of the very first things that I said when I was talking about how I start my layout design, where it used to be how I used to start my layout design, and that was to arrange and organize the data when everything was completely plain, hopefully black and white. But there's a number of things that we can do in order to make this easier on ourselves while we're designing in FileMaker's layout mode, since that's what this series is about. We will do that, but we need to decide first, what are we going to keep on screen versus off screen? Now, there's a lot of things that are not going to belong on screen. So on this file, the ID is something that I almost never show. But there are situations where when I'm designing my layout, for some reason, you want to be able to see, you need to see what ID a particular record is. So I don't just get rid of this field, I tend to put it off into the non-visible area over here. So when we go into browse mode, the user won't be able to see the ID, but I will be able to put that back on screen. Now there's one thing that I do in particular, heading back into layout mode, and that is this. I believe it's in this file. We're going to head over to Manage Custom Functions, and I do not currently have one of my most valuable functions that I like to use in all of my FileMaker database systems. So we're going to need to take a quick trip over to Safari. I'm going to create a new tab, go to GitHub, and type in FileMaker Standards, go to the FileMaker Functions, And I believe there it is right there. So the function that I'm looking for is this one. This one function I put into every single FileMaker database that I develop. I created it a long time ago, 2011. The easiest way to get this in, and I'll have to put a link to this, is click on the raw, and I'll have to put this link in the video. It's not in there right now. And I just select everything here, and I copy this, and I'm going to put the custom function in the database. Now, first, let's take a little gander at this. Basically, what this function does is it simply determines if the current logged in account is a full access account, or if you've used one of a few other methods to identify a given account as a developer account. So a developer account doesn't just have to be full access, and we can see that all the way down here at the bottom right here where we're saying evaluate get account privilege set name full access. And it turned out that FileMaker at one point in time changed. It was right around FileMaker 11 that we can see right here, that they changed the name of the function from privilege set name to account privilege set name. So this function is basically accounting for versions going back prior to FileMaker 11, which did have functions, custom functions. But essentially, all we want to do is get all this into our FileMaker solution. So let's go put that in. So in my time track database, I go to Manage, I go to Custom Functions, I click on New, and I select in this area, anytime that I copy a function from either Jeremy Bonte or Dan Smith or anybody else, typically they will put the prototype up here at the top. I can see no parameters are required. So I double click, I copy, and I just paste developer, and I say OK. So now that I have that function in my file, anything that I want to put on screen that will only show for me as the developer can easily be done with a hide calculation. So there's two ways about this. One, the safest way, if you're paranoid, you never want it to be seen. Any field that you know you're going to want to reference as you're working on your user interface, you can always bring it back on screen at any given time and go into browse mode. Now, if it's a live database and you do like to work on your solution while other users are using it, while it's hosted, it's one of the benefits that FileMaker has. Some companies do not allow it. Some companies do allow it. And it really depends on, you have to know your traffic. How heavy is the file being hit, or how much is it being hit? But with the inspector here, I go to that fourth area in the inspector tab, and I'm looking for this right here, my hide object when. So I can always hide an object when not developer. It's a super simple thing that you can put in, but it allows you to leave certain things on screen as you're designing and developing your solution. So with that on screen, and I want to make sure that it reads developer. If you don't have the developer function in there, what will happen is you'll end up something that'll look like that. Now that's saying not the string of developer. That's not what I want. I want it to say not the developer function. So what happens is now any other user that's logged in would not see this ID unless they met the developer requirements, which in this case is currently just full access. But if you dig deeper into that function, you would be able to see that you can create extended privileges, you can create specific accounts. It's completely up to you. But for the purpose of design, let's just get that off screen now that I've made it work the way that I want. All right, I do not need two different close buttons. Let's double click them and take a look. This one is performing the script close session, and this one is performing the script close alt. Let's go ahead and take a look at our scripts, see what we have there in terms of what they're doing. Close session right here is going to, this is the one where I copy the ID and go to a new record and then set that ID into that record for each close. Close alt is the one where, this goes back to the previous series, series 3, where we were talking about data and structure, and we set up these two different ways to do this, and one is going through the relationship. Now, if I look at this set field stop time ID parent, we can always go into our defined database, look at our relationships, and look at what this is referencing right here. This is stop time ID parent. So I look at this stop time ID parent, and my context is currently this right here. I'm on a layout tied to this table occurrence, and it's this right here, and I know that's an absolute required table occurrence. So I get to decide which one am I going to use. I am going to use my close alt, I believe. I'm going to move that into my folder of my user interface of my layout time layout where I want to see all of those different scripts. So that means closed session I'm not going to use anymore. What do I do? There's multiple things you can do when you hit a script that you're no longer going to use as you develop. You can hit the delete key and just get rid of it. For me, this is a little bit of a it's not, I wouldn't call it, it's probably, I am that guy. I know that internally, every script that you create, despite the fact that FileMaker probably allows 4 quadrillion scripts to be created, I know that each one gets an ID. You should probably not worry about things that I worry about here. The fact that this script has an ID number, and it's an early ID number. So what I'll do is I'll simply select in here, select all of my steps, delete all of the steps, double click, and just call this ... unused. So I don't know why I do this, but it is a good way. This does lead me to a good little tip about development. Up at the top here of our list of folders, what's a good idea is whenever you're working on a FileMaker solution, it's always good to keep track of scripts that are no longer used. You can always keep the steps, which is always a good idea. Deleting those probably isn't something that I do in a normal solution, but I know in this case, I'm not going to use those. Create a folder up towards the top of the list of folders. And the reason that I selected this item right here is because whatever is selected, whenever you click a folder or a new script, it's created right after that item. So when I click Create Folder, I'm going to put a folder called Deprecated. Now, deprecated is basically like a staging area for your scripts. So I'm simply going to move unused into deprecated because the danger is if you ever just wholesale delete your scripts and then you find out that somewhere down the road they're attached to that one critical button, you do the forehead slap and you're just like, oh, that was stupid. Why did I delete that script? So just like with most modern operating systems, when you throw a file into the trash, it's not gone forever until you empty the trash. I suggest the same thing in your FileMaker solution. Create a folder called deprecated or even trash if you want to. Drag the script in there and then give yourself the time to check and use other tools to make sure that script truly is not needed anymore. So in this case, I'm going to say it's not needed for me. I'm going to use Close Alt. Let's get back to our user interface. So this one is Close Alt and this one is Close. I'll get rid of that. And I now have a decision to make on my user interface. I have a couple of elements here. They're all sort of conveying the same thing. And if there's one thing I want you to take away from this lesson, it is this. Be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very specific about determining what needs to be on screen versus what doesn't need to be on screen in order to accomplish something. And so let's go through what I'm talking about. So we have 3 different pieces of information right here, all of which pretty much indicate the same thing. And that is, what is this particular record? Is this a start time record or is it a close time record? Now, when it comes to our user interface, we can make a choice to keep all of these 3 things on the screen, but we have to ask ourselves, really, is that necessary? First off, we have what designates whether a record is or is not a start time or an end time. It is the type of record. It is either an open type or a closed type. And if you didn't get the data, if you haven't watched the data videos, data and structure, the type field happens to be a number field. So we're just using a Boolean and we're saying that 0 is a start and right there is our comment that we even left for ourselves. Very nice. 0 means that it's open or a start time and 1 means it's closed, which is the record is a child to a parent, which is a start. Go back and watch that data video. So really I ask myself now, do I need type on this layout? Do I need to see whether a record is open or closed, or does the start and close button already convey what the type of record is? And yes, it does. So next, so that's cool. We got rid of an item that we don't need to have on our user interface. Every time we can get more simple, more sublime, but still stay functional, that's our goal. So now we have these two buttons, start and close. Well, formerly in my user interface, up in the header area, I had a number of items, and one of them was start. And I had close on the record itself. So when I came into this solution, I would, at the top, I would select the project that I'm working on. Maybe it's project 4. Well, let's get project 7 because it has data in it. And then I would click start, and that would create a new record. Now, from a design standpoint, I still have a decision to make with the user interface here. Am I going to primarily have the user work with their time tracking in a form view where I just isolate them to one record, knowing that that one record is either going to be a start or it's going to be a close? Or do I work in a list view and maybe show just a small subset of records or show the full set of records? And it really boils down to how is the user going to interact with this on a day-to-day basis. When I originally created the file, I, as a FileMaker developer, didn't care. I don't care if I see a full list of records of start and end times all dealing with one specific project. But that may be different than if I was going to make this solution available for other users. They're not FileMaker developers. They don't know. So I think what I'm going to choose is to go with just the plain form view. The user is only going to see one record at any given time. So what that means to me is they're either going to have no records found or they're going to have some records found. And that happens when we make our selection right here on our drop-down list. You saw that when we select record project 4, we get the trailing grand summary showing here. There's no body part because there are no records that are loaded. We can see that we have a 0 found set. So it's in this area that I'm going to be able to have a start button where they could click, and that start button can very easily mirror the location that the start and close button is in the form view. So if I did, or excuse me, in the record view when I am showing records. So let's see what that might look like. I'm going to move the start button out of the header, and I'm going to move it into this area right within the body, knowing that when a body record is showing, I can either click on the start or I can click on the close. And again, remember, I'm shooting these videos live. So if this doesn't work out for me as I'm doing this, I will revise and then come up with a new system. But I know that ultimately what I'm trying to accomplish is an user interface that has the fewest number of items that a user has to digest in order to accomplish what they need to get done. And also a good tip is this. Whenever I'm considering a user interface, I'll throw in some text here, consider these 3 things. I always go like this, 1, 2, and 3. Do it right here on the FileMaker layout. Do it in another text document. It doesn't matter where you do it, but these 3 items, we're not talking about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If a user can do 8 different primary things in your one user interface, that might be a problem. You typically want to narrow a user interface down to what are the 3 biggest things that a user is going to do in the layout that you're working on. Well, let's think about this. The number one thing that they're going to do in this particular layout is they are going to start, well, the first is find a project, start or stop time. And now what becomes one of the things that maybe a user might do. For me, as I'm using this solution, I want to know how much time I've worked. That's what's important to me as the user. Now, that may not be important to who we're going to design for when it comes to other users, which maybe is managers or anybody who needs to see times of workers that are working for that company or that person. But I'm going to say time worked here, which is basically duration. So that's going to be important. So with these 3 things on my screen, I will keep these either off to the side, or I typically have a little document where I, OmniFocus is what I use in order to track all of my different items. It's a Mac application for tracking your tasks. And I keep these things, and if you have them here in mind, you're always thinking about them. Like find a project. How can I make finding a project the easiest thing to do? How many clicks does it take? How many steps? So start and stop. If I overlap these, knowing that close is only going to show on certain records and start is only going to show on certain records, maybe I'll just make those the same and overlap them. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to choose any colors right now. We're just going to arrange the data. So let's zoom out here temporarily and let me get to some tools that I like to use, which are in the Position tab. So the Arrange and the Align are absolutely wonderful. I personally set keys to all of the Arrange and Align values right here. In fact, if I had my preferences file, I have a special preferences file where in my copy of FileMaker, all of the manage, every one of these menu options has an associated key equivalent. I even created a FileMaker file that allows me to assign them automatically. Now, when it comes to the Arrange and we get the Align and Distribute, I have key combinations for everything here that isn't an existing key combination, because doing your layout design with using what I call reference objects makes it so much faster, because when you have keys and you've memorized those keys, all I have to do is set one of these buttons to the size that I want and then use it as the reference for the other objects. So if I had this button and it happened to be a little bit smaller, I select my first object, I select my second, and then I use the first one as the reference. Because FileMaker's Align has a shrink to smallest size, both on the width and the height, and it can go larger for the height and larger for the width. So whenever you use these reference objects, all I have to do, and these icons are sort of confusing, so that's why I like the keys. They're locked in my memory. And I would be able to, with these two selected, just hit two keys, boom, boom, and both of them would be exactly the same size. Then when it comes to aligning them, I would be able to hit another set of keys and it would align them both right on their right edges. So let's see what it looks like if we do this manually. So first off, I would resize these to the largest width and resize these to the largest height. That makes both of them the same. Then I would left align, then I would top align. So you can see it's just 4 clicks there. 1, 2, 3, 4, and you get these objects using one as a reference, all in the exact same point. So now the next thing that I need to do is I need to account for the 2 different situations in this database. The first situation is if no records are showing, then the trailing grand summary part will be showing. If records are showing, then I'm going to be getting the body, which will show, and regardless of whether it's form view or list view, I will get those records. So what I do now is I want to put these same buttons. I don't need the close necessarily. I only need the start. So let's go ahead and just make a copy of the start with an option drag. And we'll select those again. We'll marquee them and put them left and top. So they're on top of each other. I'll probably even send the close to the back. But you probably know what I'm going to do. I'm going to use where these layout parts start in order to align my objects. Now the first thing that I need to do is go to my auto sizing and select all of these objects, because doing things in bulk is much easier. Please don't select the start and then make your changes and then select your close and then make your changes and then move the close off, select the start and make your change. No. We're not going to do that. We are simply just going to select both of these, align them, and then we are going to do a bulk action, which is what we always do. Select everything that we want affected, and then we're going to make our changes. So we're going to go to our auto sizing here. We're going to anchor this to the right, and we can leave it on the top. We're going to turn off the left because we don't want it to anchor on both and then stretch out. We want it to stay over here on this side of the user interface. And now I'm going to select the body part, go to reveal the position, and look at the topmost right here, or the top of that body part. So the top currently for the body part is 48. So whenever you're doing your layout design, you want things to be, they need to seem the same. When the user is looking at the user interface, things that hop around, very jarring. We don't want to do that. So we need to use just a basic math, addition, subtraction. So with 48, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select and move this. Now I will zoom off a little bit here. And as we learned about, I'm going to turn on my grid. I could just use the grid right now in order to do that. I can see that my grid's off a little bit because my minor right here, or my body part, is not falling on a grid line. So I probably should take the time and do that. I haven't really decided what I want for the body height, so we're going to do this the way that I've already started telling you. I know that if I drag this right here, that because of my grid, I am now 16 off from this edge and 16 from the top of this particular part. So that means that this start, at least I can use this right here. And since I'm not on a major line or a minor grid line, this is actually a good example. When you're designing your user interface, you do not always have to stick with your grid. Sometimes you go with half grid points, and it really just depends on the design in terms of what you're working with. But here's the way that we would mathematically solve this. We would, as I zoom out just a little bit, we know that we're 16 points off of the top. We would select our trailing grand summary, look at its top of 342. And again, I lamented the fact that, it really sucks that FileMaker doesn't have this particular situation, because if it did, FileMaker, hopefully you're not detecting my anger here, I would simply be able to go like this, 342 plus, which I can't hit the plus key because FileMaker doesn't take it right now, but I would put plus 16, and then this would just jump automatically to 342 plus 16. But lo and behold, I have to go use a calculation to do it. I use an application called LaunchBar, which allows me to do the math. So I'll go 342 plus 16 gives me 358. If you're good at math and you could have done that in your head, congratulations for you. I don't do good math in my head. But what I have now is I have a button that matches the buttons that the user will see within the user interface, and that's what we want to do. We don't even want any slight pixel jumping when we're going to do things. We've currently got ugly colors, but we can see right here we've got this start. So we'll probably want to solve that. We also need to solve this. This is an easy solution down here in the bottom, because we already have the hide calculations set right here of you've reached the end. We go over to our fourth area of the tab. Take a look at the not get found count. So in this case, we're going to say it's the opposite for this one. Let's just copy it. Get found count. Copy paste is really wonderful in FileMaker. We'll apply it in find mode. See if we fixed that. We should have. Scroll to the bottom. Awesome. Start doesn't show. Let's omit all of our records with Command or Control T. Cool. So if we do a selection, we say, okay, project 7, it loads our records. The script trigger was firing. We go to project 4. We don't have any records, but we have a nice convenient start button, which is going to be cool. And when we will line up our projects, it'll look really nice. So now let's solve our problem right here. Do we need a start on each of the records? Probably most of the time we do not need the start. And I really have to think about this now. Do I need the start up in the top, just because really the only button that I'm going to want on each record is a close? I can't think of a situation because I'm not going to click a start on a record that doesn't exist, which is the purpose of the start. So at this point, I probably need to rethink my user interface a little bit. Maybe I'll think about going with your standard iconic representation. If this was going... Yeah, let's go that route. All right, I'm now thinking that if this is going to be used on desktop and mobile, I'm going to go for the mobile look. And I will leave that start button there on that trailing grand for now. Maybe it'll get moved. Maybe I'll scrap everything that I'm doing right here, but the whole purpose of this video is just to learn some of the techniques that I use. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a copy of the Start button. This one, remember, whenever you make a copy, if you're doing it within your user interface, you have multiple attributes that are set to this object that unless you pay attention, they stay set. This has a hide calculation on it. It could have a tooltip calculation. It also could have conditional formatting, script triggers, all of those things. If you want to be safe, select your button tool and make a new button, then select the style and apply the style, etc. I'm comfortable here. I know that the only thing on this button is the hide object. I'll take it off because I made the copy. Double click the button and I'm going to go with the standard iOS convention of card window type of layout design where you have an icon up on you can have actions up on the top and the left. So I'll make this my standard little plus widget right there. Start itself is just creating a new record, so we don't have a script associated. So I will have to work on the user interface with that. Again, notice because of my grid and because it's hopping here, my grid is set to be 48 high, which accommodates these three, but I can't just do it. The button height is the width of 2 grid squares, which is 16 and 16. I believe, what is that? If we go to command 1, we look at 32. So I need to center it within here. I can, of course, turn the grid off down at the very bottom there. Let's turn the grid. I can turn snap to grid off, and I can take the time to drag this around, or I can leave the grid on, and once I have one object, use the reference object. This one is already centered within this area, so I'll select it first, select the second, and then I will align them on their middles. Nope, I didn't want that. Wanted to go on the tops, the top of that one. So awesome, puts my button. Now in layout design, alignment becomes very important. We'll probably have a video about that. And I will drag that so that that pops. Notice that my alignment is already starting to happen here where I want these buttons to align on that edge. We might as well take the time and do it with the duration as well. Duration already is aligned. In your user interface, it's very difficult for users, and I'll show this in a future video, you can use grid lines themselves to find out all of the visual breakpoints in your user interface where the user has to stop, visually scanning across, and determine why these breaks actually happen. So if you can align objects, especially in a left to right reading language versus a right to left, whichever language it is, you want to align on those so that it's very easy to process visually, those things. So all of these things being aligned here, being the same, really helpful. One of the things I was going to try to do is I was going to try to not have this button here. I was going to try to have projects directly over this object like that so that I had a column of data, because it makes it easier for me to visually process as opposed to something that is staggered. Well, I need to anchor that. We'll go to auto sizing. We'll anchor the projects right there. And you can see that's jarring. I come down and then I hit and then I have to go in, and that works for information when you've got a title and then you want sub information in that, and you're going to have a lot of information that's going to be aligned. But in the case of these buttons, ideally I would have this be aligned so that everything just feels much more comfortable in terms of the design. But of course, we've got this start issue where I'm going to have that button that's going to have to go away. The close would work for me, and I'll have to find out what I'm going to do with this. I'll probably be thinking about the user interface and how I want to do this. Most of the time, the reason that I'm wanting to put the plus button over here is because that's the convention that iOS uses. So I want to leverage the fact that users are already used to that. Why try to be creative and force a user to learn something new? It makes my application less usable. I'll use that convention. But that does conflict with the fact that I'd like to have the close, start, and project buttons over on this side. And so what do I choose? Do I choose to put the start here? Do I choose to make the plus button the width of the close? Probably not. Or do I just put the plus button all the way over here and simply, use my reference and put it over there. So I'll have to think about that in terms of the look and feel as we go forward here. Adjust was used for us just for messing around, so we'll throw that off screen. In fact, what does the adjust do? We double click, we look at it, perform script adjust, we open our scripts, we take a look at adjust. This was doing, I'm betting this is doing the same thing. Because we were learning, you have to keep these things in mind. If I look at the close alt, I bet you it's exactly the same. Nope, just slightly different. Stop time, ID parent, adjust. This was a learning script for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it my temporary deprecation. I happen to use the bullet character to prefix any script that I need to consider in the future and determine whether that's a script that's going to go away and go into the deprecated folder for me to get rid of, or if I'm just going to delete it. All right, so we are at 35 right here, and I've done a fair amount of explaining and using FileMaker's interface to accomplish this. I'm going to have to think about what we want for the start button here versus here, but I know that we can test this out a little bit. I'll get rid of that start button because I took a copy of it right there. We'll just, I hate it when FileMaker shifts just by a pixel right there. It did. I will make my little plus icon a little bit bigger, and I'll probably even make that a transparent button if it's going to be a iOS-like user interface. But I should be able to, I need to change the anchoring. Anchor back onto the other side right there. I should be able to say project 4, I'll go ahead, start me a new project. I'll need to determine whether I'm going to be in form view. If I am going to be in form view, then it will go to form view. The bottom part will be obscured when I click that start. We'll have to work that out as we go along. These are the things that watching a video are a little bit boring, watching somebody develop and think about things. If you've never heard this saying, development is more thinking than it is implementation, because a lot of the times you're just thinking about the solution to the problem with the tool set that you currently know. And that's why we're learning FileMaker. If you don't know how you can additionally do things, then your tool set isn't as expansive, and you can only solve the problems within the framework that you know. So by watching these videos, hopefully you're getting ideas of how you can, different ways that you can solve problems, expands that tool set, and then you can think about what is the best way to solve this for this particular situation. And even here doing this live, I have to think about, how do I want users to interact with this? And I'm getting the feeling that I really want this addition button. If I'm going to allow this to be used on an iPhone and on a tablet, I'm really going to want that over there because I want to leverage that users are so used to that. So I'll have to determine where I want to put this, and maybe they'll just shift in slightly. But I really don't like buttons just sitting in the middle of my user interface. So we're going to have to achieve some balance with the other information and start to lay out the rest of the data. So I think that's going to do it for today for a wrap, and we'll get to our questions here. So it's not a complete wrap. We'll see if we had a lot of questions as I was shoveling a lot of things around. No, it does. I know it looks like we haven't made a lot of progress, but hey, that's the price we pay for learning. So let's head over to our chat and see what came in here. If we had any questions, number of them popping in here. All right, stream started, nothing came up. Hey, Jean-Pierre. Hello, question. Good, thank you for the prefix of the question, by the way. It's possible to hide a tab within a tab control of 4 tabs. Yes, it is. You can always put a tab panel on your screen, select one of the tabs, and I believe you can hide one tab. How to know what script is attached to what object layout trigger. There are 2 ways that you can do that. Let's take a look here. Let's do our little test here. We'll drag out a tab panel and we will go 1, 2, 3. Zoom in really quickly here. And we will say, okay, easiest way to test for hiding is to select the tab and go over to our inspector. And let's see, we can hide object. Easiest way to test hiding is to just type in true. I want to force this to hide. And it may be for the whole panel. I may be forgetting things here. We'll go into browse mode. It applies to the whole panel. My mistake. Sorry about that. You cannot individually hide a given panel, but you can solve this problem. So thank you for the question. Let's take a look at how we would do that. Take this off, this hide right here, and you're going to have to do this little trick. There's two different ways you can do this. You can do a no tab panel, or you can do an off-screen panel. My preference, an off-screen panel. You have to use two different objects in order to accomplish this, but I would double-click the panel. I will set the justification, obviously, to the right. I will anchor this object so that it expands and is anchored both to the left and the right. I would then drag this off the edge of the screen so that the tabs themselves will always be off-screen. Now, how do we navigate to each individual tab? The way that we do that is you have to select a given tab, and you must give that tab a name. In this case, I would call this tab 1, and the one next to it, I would call tab 2. Now, again, if you watched yesterday's video where we talked about the distinction or differences between a button and a button bar, as FileMaker moves forward, they cannot break their legacy applications. If they did, people would abandon FileMaker and they'd say, forget this, I have to redo my whole situation, my whole solution. In some cases, it's a good thing to force people to move forward. In others, if you're dependent on your market share, which I think FileMaker is, then you can't break your application. So when they put in new objects like a button bar, the button bar, if we put in 1, and go to advance and put in 2, 2, and go to advance and put in 3 and go to advance. We now have we now have something that looks like the same as our tab control. And all we have to do for this particular object, we double click and we will say that it is a button. We will say single step. That single step is go to object. What object are you going to go to? Quite simply, it's going to be tab 1, like such. And we will say OK on that. Let's zoom out. We'll add tab 2 right here. And we will say we want it to perform a single step of go to object. And a little bit of a long answer here, but worthwhile one if you're watching these to learn FileMaker. Table can't be specified. Thank you, extra quote right there. So we now have a situation where we have a button bar, and we can always see that it's working by putting text on there. That's what I like to do. 1. So this is actually tab 2. We will copy that, drag it out, select 1, put it as 1, and make sure that everything works. Go into browse mode. So we now have two different objects in order to simulate the one object. The old style FileMaker tab panel does not allow us to make individual tabs hidden, but the combination of a tab panel, which holds multiple pieces of information, and a tab bar allows us to go to 1, allows us to go to 2. So these are working, and finally our result. Can we hide just this one object with a button bar? We can. I'm almost 100% sure, otherwise I showed you how to do something for nothing. Let's hide it. True. Apply in find mode, or whatever conditions you want. Go into browse mode, 2 is gone. The only difficulty with button bars is you can see that the button bar, the absolute width of the button bar, still stays the same. So the buttons that were formerly this big just became bigger because we're hiding one segment of that. It's really not that big of a deal if you don't have the boundaries turned on, but you just have words that shift. It is something that you have to deal with. There is a trick, however. I'm giving you all the goods extra here. If I knew that I always was only going to be hiding one object, I can always add an additional segment that I'm going to leave blank at the end that will accommodate for that. And this object will hide or show based on any other button or any other segment in the button bar that hides or shows, so that I can maintain the width of my buttons. Hopefully that makes sense. But you can see right now I maintained the width of my button bar and the size of my button segments, and 2 is gone in this case. And maybe if the condition is met, when the condition is met, 2 comes back and the placeholder segment goes away. So there you go. Hopefully that was a good answer to that particular problem. One of the reasons that we're watching live. Good day. Why not use easy math? Like, yeah, easy math. It's just too hard to question. There we go. Fernando. Hola, Fernando. Hi, Matt. If no records and click on the trailing part or the body, I get a not so desirable FM message any way out. How could you capture this? Let's see what happens when we do that. Do we get a message? We'll go hide everything. No records found. Why is FileMaker showing me a body part? Oh, because I'm in form view. That's why. I am clicking and I get a start. Maybe it's because you're in form view. Let's go to form view and hide everything. And I need to switch back. No, I don't know. We'll have to take a look at what's happening there with regards to that particular situation. It may be the tab. Let's switch back. It might be this. Do I have tab turned on? You will get a message right here. If any type of key characters, here's how we replicate this. If this is what's coming up for you before typing, press tab or click field. When you have a 0 found set with FileMaker, no records are shown. If you start to type or pass any given key to FileMaker, FileMaker does this thing where it basically says, oh, you must be wanting to type into a field, but there are no fields because I have no records shown. Let me show you this nice little ugly dialog box. Before typing, press tab or click in a field. In order to get rid of this, most of the time we've got things on screen where the user is making an interaction, and fortunately, the one way you could catch this, if this is what you're talking about, Fernando, and you're having this problem, is you can set a on layout script trigger. So we'll go into layout mode. We will go to layouts. We will go to the layout setup, or if using the tip that we had from Chip, we can just right click on the layout, choose layout setup, and look at our script triggers, and we have this one right here, the on layout keystroke right there. That on layout keystroke allows you to capture any keystroke prior to FileMaker receiving it. And in that regard, you can determine and watch for any specific keystroke. And if it's just a random keystroke, you can ignore that keystroke by simply exiting that script with a false. And then you won't get that dialog box. It'll be completely solved if the user starts to type. And I think that might be what you're talking about, but I don't know for sure. All right, see if we've got any more questions here. Matt, do you put comments in your scripts? I certainly do. Nice tip on the blank button bar. Yep, you can always use placeholders. Clicking on any other part on list view, it says no records. And again, that right there, we'll have to solve that. Clicking on any other part in list view. So we'll go there quickly and take a look before we wrap up the video. Browse. So we will make sure we've got 0 found set. I'm clicking. I don't know why mine is not showing that and yours is. Let's do a find all. I'm clicking. I am not able to replicate getting a dialog box based on clicking with either a 0 found set or with a found set of records. So maybe we can get more information on that and we'll be able to see what Fernando is hitting as a problem. But for now, since I can't replicate, hard one to diagnose, and means that we are heading into our wrap up. All right, so you know the drill if you've been watching any of these videos. Of course, you can subscribe here on YouTube and get notified via the YouTube app or what have you. Also, next video in this series is going to be coming up here. You can check out FileMakerMagazine.com, FileMakerThemes.com. Much luck to you in your FileMaker development, and until next time, happy file making.